Welcome to the meeting for the City of Reading for November 3rd, 2020. This is a regular session meeting. Please join me in a prayer and our pledge. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us today our daily bread.
Give us our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have the council member roll call, please?
Mr. Powell?
Here.
Mr. Gertz?
Here.
Mr. Lynn?
Here.
Mr. Albrecht?
Here.
Mr. Lindemann?
Here.
Mr. Fischescher?
Here.
Mrs. Edichico?
Here.
Approval of minutes. Unless there's any objection, the minutes for the council meeting on October 20th, a regular session, are approved as they were distributed. Those minutes are approved. We do have two sets of guest speakers tonight. The first will be representatives from Duke Energy. The second will be our Linda Fitzgerald with Brenda Weimer, and we'll get to those after the first. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce Mr. Ross to introduce our first guest.
Thanks, Chris. As everybody knows, the Central Corridor pipeline has been an issue going back all the way to 2017. There were two routes that were given. One was the primary, one was the alternate. The Power Siting Board up in the state of Ohio, after doing all the due diligence, basically chose the route that goes through the city of Reading. I'm not going to go back through all of that. It's been talked about a lot, and it's been shown, how the elected officials and appointed officials feel about the pipeline. However, once it was given approval at the state level, we are still appealing it, and there is an appeal outstanding. However, our law director, Dave Stevenson, and Duke's lawyers and everybody involved, they can move forward with getting all of their permits, easements, et cetera, to move forward. And granting of permits and easements, and I know Dave Stevenson was the one that was clear about this, does not mean that we approve of the project or that it gives up our rights in the appeal. What brings the Duke representatives here tonight, probably about a month or 6 weeks ago, I sent over you kind of a lengthy packet for three easements that Duke requires for their pipeline. The three locations are one on the western portion of the Public Works garage nearest the railroad track. It crosses over there, in the roadway on West Street, kind of right in front of the Gertz Monument and the stadium. That is the other location. And the third one is at the former Nivison site along 3rd Street along the railroad. For background, this was the site, as far as concerns about future use and development that I personally had, especially being, what limitations on future use. And one of the bigger ones was, due to a pipeline and railroad inhibiting a future rail spur for a potential company. And we did have, when we had a company that was looking at it, one of the things that they really liked was they were going to do a rail spur either at the north or the south end of the property. They weren't exactly sure where they were going to put it because they hadn't built, designed the building yet. But having seen their plans, I certainly didn't want to hurt, the site as far as future development. We brought these up, myself, the law director, in this process, and Duke has added language that is in there now that I don't have that language in front of me. So anybody from Duke can point that out or read that specific sentence if you have it handy. But basically, they will make the necessary construction adjustments once, an end user, if an end user says, hey, we want to put a rail spur here, they will make the necessary adjustments with their pipeline and our site to make sure that it meets the standards for their safety and to allow for the rail spur to occur. So this was put into place. The law director has reviewed the documents. And other than, I think maybe a couple typos and there was one provision about basically non-disclosure of the amounts, which I think Mr. Stevenson said, as a public agency, we're not allowed to do that because it's more as a local government. So the purpose of them here tonight is to find out before I passed or presented an ordinance to you guys. I wanted to have Duke here. As you guys have reviewed the easement documents, any questions you have, concerns, so we can get those discussed and ironed out. And then, so I'll leave it now open to council if you have any questions. We have Jamie Olberding, who is, I believe, the project manager for the entire project. Chad Schaefer, I don't know I always forget your official title, but he's the man to go to. He's the go-to guy.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm Senior Government Affairs Specialist. That's a mouthful, but really appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. Thanks, Patrick.
We have Gary Hebler, who I'll let Gary, you're the vice president of GAS. So I'll let the rest of the guys introduce themselves, and then you guys can take any questions.
Sure. Chad, you want to introduce everybody?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. First of all, just want to say thank you very much for the invitation to join you this evening. And we look forward to the discussion. We really don't have anything formal prepared. We really are here on hand just to answer any questions that the council may have for us. And again, I'm Chad Schaefer with Duke Energy and our government affairs team. We have Gary Hebler, who is our vice president of our natural gas business unit and special projects. And then we have Jamie Olberding, who is in our natural gas business unit, and he's the project manager for the Central Corridor project. We also have Dale Liggett, who is part of our Duke Energy land team, and Ryan Battle, who is our right-of-way specialist with Burns McDonnell. And we're just really happy to be here, answer any questions you may have on the proposed easements. And thanks again for the invite. Our team stands ready to assist any way we can.
Any questions from council?
Well, the only thing I would have to say is I guess all the gentlemen realize that we've gone on record. We don't like this coming through any of the, a lot of it's in my ward, and we don't like that coming through such more predominant areas of people who only not like 3rd Street. People live, that's not my ward. There's a lot of residents there curious how they're going to do that, if they're going to stay off the right of way and take, go down through. I understand they're now talking about going down through where the sidewalk area is, or even some of the front of the properties on 3rd Street. Of course, coming down West Street, which is, there's a lot of, of course, it's right in the middle of our athletic programs, our athletic fields. And it's also going through a new developed area of OPNC that we're trying to see accomplished. I was wondering if there were other possible routes, but nevertheless, that battle's being fought, and I don't know if I can do any good with that, so I'm not going to beat it to death tonight. Yeah, I got a later appointment I have to be to.
So what happens if we don't approve any or all of these easements?
This is Gary Hebler. I would hope we would be able to work through the easements and not have to go to any next steps. Be quite honest with you, we've worked together with the city and many projects, the accelerated main replacement program that we did over for 15 years and worked through all those issues. And I'm confident we'll be able to work through issues that we come about this time. Mr. Getz asked about the kind of the construction. We're looking at, like on West Street, we're looking at an access into the community center coming around through the Dow property and making sure we have access to the community center, 100% of the time, going through both ways. We'll have to block sections off at a time during the day, and we'll open those back up at night. And if we have issues during the day, we'll be able to throw plates on the ditch pretty quickly. But the way we got it set up is to try to move in through the city as quickly as possible, as quickly and safely as possible. And that's why we worked with your team to make that happen. So I'm confident that we can construct this, and I know it's impactful to the community, but we're trying to make an impact as much as possible.
Does
Hey,
Duke
Dennis.
have any recourse legally?
Well, can I answer? I'm not gonna, I don't want to speak on behalf of Dave Stevenson, but I asked the exact same question, Dennis. Basically, they could go to court to have the easements granted with or without council's action. But, as Mr. Hebler said, whether we like the project or not, and it's generally my job to be the middleman, and, I'd rather work with them if possible. Because, we're going to be working with Duke, beyond this project for many, many years. And so basically Mr. Stevenson said that, because it was granted by the siting board, they can get the easements whether council grants them or not. I'm sure.
Did he say whether they could get a quick take or would it be litigated? Quick take.
He didn't say how, he didn't say how long, it would be or any of that stuff. No, he did not.
They might inquire about that. I think they can get a quick take on roadways, but I don't know about this type of project.
Chris, I was just wondering if, I think Patrick started to explain a little bit about what the cost is for the easements. Is that negotiable or is that set? I don't want to go into 4 years of trying to fight this pipeline and go about each location of all the drawbacks for putting it down there by the stadium or over on 3rd Street or any of the locations. But is it negotiable what the cost of these easements are going to be?
This is Gary Hebler again. I mean, they are negotiable. What we did was we had a professional go out and take a look at the area, and we put a value, basically using the professional put a value of that easement, and that's what's in the offer.
But it still could be changed if you negotiate more, Patrick. Correct?
It potentially could. I mean, we have discussed, actually.
I hope so.
This wasn't the first amount. I don't know if Dale joined on here.
I am here. Can you hear me now?
Yes. So, we have discussed, because one of my questions, if you look through the easement documents, it gives you a range, and I believe Duke went to the high end of the I think the max of the range. Generally for easements, there's percentages associated with those. I brought it up to them. I said, well, why are we doing I don't remember the number, 75% instead of the 100. And he explained generally how these work. And then they did revise numbers and went up. So I do know that from the initial amount, it's more than when we started the process, Mr. Lindeman.
That doesn't have anything to do with how they're gonna finish the site after they're finished with putting the pipe in.
No, we've
That might be somewhere where,
that's already been
Wow.
discussed early on. You're talking about the roadway through there.
yes,
They are going to be repaving curb to curb through all the roadway. That's not part of the easement. That was part of the street opening. That's one of the conditions for that is repaving curb to curb, and that's something that they agreed to very early on. And it's standard for what we do. It's standard when MSD was doing the project on Benson all the way through down to the Mill Creek. You know, they repaved curb to curb. So it's just been standard, and they are doing that through the parts that are roadway paved.
okay. And Linda, you've been involved with this since the beginning. Did you have any questions?
Let me unmute. Everyone, council and the representatives of Duke, I think should be aware by now how I feel about this. I'm the economic development director. So those sites that you're going through become vulnerable for redevelopment and the ability to generate earnings tax and new investment. And I'm going to keep this short because it sounds like it's a fait accompli. But the city of Reading has aging infrastructure, a disproportionate share of brownfield sites, chemical plants, the MSD site, US EPA Superfund sites, and now we're getting a gas pipeline through two of our most important economic development generators for the future. And, you know, I just remember the day that we were the alternate route. And then one day I woke up and magically we were the selected route. Don't know how that happened. I have an idea, but it's done. So my question to you as the city's economic development director is on that Nivison-Weiskopf site, the state of Ohio, the city of Reading, and US EPA have invested $3.2 million into that 14-acre site to make it job ready for a life science company. We had a company some time ago that was going to generate 400 jobs on that site and 240,000 square feet of life science space that would have provided us critical earnings tax, provided our schools significant property tax. I would like reassurances from all of you here tonight at Duke that you are not going to jeopardize the ability of that site to be redeveloped to that extent in the future by what you're doing. Because if you cannot reassure me of that, I'm sorry, this is just Duke picking on Reading again, like everybody else does. And I want to know that you can reassure that we will be able to realize those economic development gains. We got 3.2 million invested already in the property to do that.
This is Gary Hebler. From the pipeline standpoint, we went through there to minimize any impact that we could have with the pipeline.
What does that mean, Gary? What does that mean?
Does
that mean that I'm going to have less than 240,000 square feet or less than 400 jobs, high-paying jobs?
Well,
what does that mean?
Yeah, I can't answer the job side of it, you know, because I don't know what's going to be there. But as far as the easement's concerned, that easement can have, you can't have a structure within the easement, and we lessen or shorten the easement as much as possible is what we did. And so we would not impact the property as much. And so you can put, you know, parking areas, just can't put structures within that easement. You can cross it with utilities. It's a non-exclusive easement, so there's utilities that can be put in that corridor. So I think we've lessened the impact. And with the railroad spur that can be put there, what we're going to do instead of putting flowable fill all the way down through there, because I think that's a barrier. I think all the water drains towards the towards the railroad. We don't want a barrier in there. So wherever the spur is, we'll go back and put the flowable fill. The pipe is deep enough to accommodate the spur. So we'll go back and put the flowable fill in once you let us know where the spur is going to go. So I think we've accommodated your request.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Thank you, Linda.
Mhm.
I have a question. Have all the gentlemen from Duke walked the entire path of the pipeline through Reading? Have you all introduced yourself to where the pipeline's going to run personally?
This is Gary Hebler. I've been through, not through every foot, like back through Dow. We flew that and had a camera. We had videos made, but I've walked wherever I could walk through the city of Reading. I have been through those streets. I don't fully understand the construction. Again, I've been with Duke, many, many years. And I've actually run the accelerated main replacement program and built most of the large diameter pipelines from 92 through 2015, and mostly urban settings.
Have you
One more
run into
question,
any
if I may,
project-
Chris. One more question about the Dow site. Have you been in close communication with the folks at the Port Authority and Nair Inc., who are proposing right now, putting plans together to redevelop that site? Are you familiar with their plans? Are you staying in touch with them?
We have to get an easement through the Port Authority. And so we're working with them to get the easement coming down to the West Street site. So we are in contact with them.
Yeah, because that's 400 jobs. And we're a landlocked first suburb community, unlike Blue Ash and all those communities that were in the first round, the first choice, and then you changed it over to us. We need those jobs.
Yep. We are
They
working
are
with,
critical to our operations.
we are meeting with each property owner and working with each property owner, trying to lessen the impact with those properties.
Okay, thank you. I've said my case.
Nice
Again.
job, Linda. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, a follow-up question of mine was, in all your walkthroughs in other communities, have you experienced the type of local pipeline to people's homes that you've seen here in Reading?
Are you talking about with this project or with
This project versus all the other projects that you would have walked down in the last 20 some years?
Yeah. I did the 2 24-inch lines downtown Cincinnati chilled water, and that was a difficult challenge. But we worked through those issues.
Okay. Once the pipeline's put in, how long will it be before the testing of the pipeline will be done? And you made the comment that you're going to do it quickly and safely. But long term, does both of those meet our long term needs of not having failures? Quickly doesn't seem like it's a good word to use when you're speaking about long term.
Great point. And so it should be safely first. I would agree with you there. This pipeline is designed to accommodate a safe transport of natural gas. We doubled the wall thickness, we increased the depth, and we increased the thickness of steel to get it down to 20% of what that pipeline could hold. And so from a safety standpoint, this pipeline is a safe pipeline, and we will construct this in a safe manner throughout the streets. We'll backfill it with the flowable fill to minimize any settlement. And we're going to do it in a timely manner to try to minimize the impact through the city the best we can.
Chris, I think I'm the one who used the word quick and safe. And when I say quick and safe, that's me from the city perspective, wanting them to minimize the interruption on the streets and roads. That's probably my language where I've said quickly and safely, because they're going to, blocks of road will be closed off at a time as they're doing it. So while, we don't want them to do anything, I do want them to, to not, I want them to work safely, but I also want them, not being here any longer than they need to be, if that makes sense, because it's going to be a disruption, for the people, not just people that live there, but the community, because, it's zigzags through. So
Understood, but I also wanted to be understood about what my point was. So.
It's very well taken. This pipeline is designed to do inline inspection, and that inline inspection tool allows us to look at the inside of the pipe, every inch of that pipe. And it's a proactive measure to prevent deterioration, or if you see deterioration, you can take care of that deterioration way in advance. And it's a great way to, it's the most modern technology that we have to ensure safety of this pipeline.
So that inspection is ongoing, not just the initial weld and backfill and then check it and then start putting gas in. Even after that, you'll be able to visually inspect the inside.
That's correct. That inline inspection goes on a cycle. It's not every year. It's on a several year cycle. I think it's on approximately a 7-year cycle is that they put that inline inspection tool in it. For the construction, we have x-rays for the welds for construction. We will jeep the pipe. Jeep pipe is you look at the coating along the pipe. That ensures that the pipe goes in a safe, quality manner. We'll have inspectors out there with our contractors. The contractors that we chose to bid on this project have been in our territory, worked in our territory in these settings. And we also went to projects that they were currently doing last year, just like this project that you're getting ready to undertake. So we went through that whole vetting process. So I am confident we're going to do this in a safe manner.
Okay, one follow-up on that. The internal inspection, what would you expect to see that you could catch early enough? Obviously, it wouldn't be like rust through or anything like that, because then that's too late. But is it?
Great question. If we had third-party damage, like if you had a contractor hit that line that didn't show up right away, and there was a dent in that pipe, then we would see that as we sent the inline inspection tool through.
Okay. That type of damage.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Well, this is touched a nerve again for us. Thank you for coming in and speaking and taking questions. Patrick, do you have anything on a follow-up here? You're on mute, but that's okay. No, okay.
No, I do not.
Thank you, gentlemen, and you're welcome to stay, or you're welcome to go ahead and jump off at this time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nesbitt and members of the council. We really appreciate the time and happy to answer any follow-ups you may have too. So thank you and have a good evening.
Okay, thank you.
for coming. We appreciate that.
Then I'd like to go ahead and introduce Miss Fitzgerald. And have you notified Ms. Weimer?
Yes, Chris, Brenda is on the meeting. Her picture is not on the meeting. Her phone doesn't have that capability,
Okay.
but she is part of the meeting now. Hi, Brenda.
Hi, Linda. Hi, council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Linda.
So, you obviously retained Brenda. Patrick took care of all of that, got that taken care of, he and Dave Stevenson, to represent the city on the proposed tax increment financing for the Dow site. And I appreciate that you did that. I think that we are in extremely good hands with Ms. Weimer. And what Patrick and I asked her to do this evening was to give you a very brief overview of what TIF is, because I'm not sure that every council member understands TIF. And every time she talks, I understand it even more. So Brenda put together a report. And Patrick, did council get a copy of that?
No.
No. Okay. Brenda, if you would just like to go ahead and give your presentation on TIF.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you again. I'm not sure how many of you were on council back when the last TIF project on the Hill was proposed, and unfortunately that did not come to fruition. But TIF is a very complex economic development tool, but it can be very useful in certain situations. And the current project proposed by the Port and Nyer seems to have a place for TIF without a lot of risk to the city. And that is usually the municipality's primary concern, is how much risk is the city taking on. So we'll start with some TIF basics, and as Linda indicated, I prepared a little 1.5 page sort of summary that Patrick and Linda will get to you later for your future reference, but it's just a brief overview of TIF, which stands for Tax Increment Financing, and what it is the ability for the municipality to declare certain projects to be a public purpose and then exempt future improvements to those parcels from real property taxes. That exemption usually comes hand in hand with a replacement of those taxes in the form of service payments in lieu of taxes, which, if utilized, are in the exact same amount as the taxes. There are some rare circumstances where you can exempt property with the TIF statutes and not actually impose the service payments. It doesn't happen very often, and one of the questions we get is, well, can we impose, part of the service payments but not all? And the answer is no. It's either all or none. You either collect service payments for what has been exempted or you don't collect them at all. I would have to say that in 95% of the cases where TIF is used, service payments are imposed. Because the real intent behind TIF was not for it to act as a property tax abatement for the property owner or the company, but for it to redirect tax revenue into infrastructure improvement. So the city exempts certain property through TIF, imposes statutory service payments in lieu of taxes. The county auditor then collects those through the normal tax process and distributes those to the city. They show up specifically identified on your tax settlement sheets so that you know how much comes from service payments, and you must deposit those into the special tax increment equivalent fund. And then the money can be used to pay for public infrastructure improvements that have been identified in the ordinance that created the TIF, and or debt service on those infrastructure improvements. Some communities will just collect the money, and when they have enough in cash, they'll go ahead and construct the improvements. In other cases, they want to construct the improvements right away, so they'll issue debt and then use the service payments as it comes in to actually make the debt payments. The other use for those service payments is to compensate school districts if necessary. We'll come back to that in a minute. So the basic premise for TIF is to grant a property tax exemption, replace it with service payments. Those service payments then allow a revenue stream that can be used to pay for infrastructure improvements, and you're getting essentially all of the tax revenue as opposed to just the millage that the city would normally collect on a piece of property. You get also the school's millage, the county's millage, and all the social service agencies' millage that is applicable to a particular property. In order to create a TIF, before you can pass the ordinance, you must notify all of the affected school districts. That includes not only the local city or exempted village school districts, but also the joint vocational school districts. If you're going to exempt more than 75% of the increased value, or exempt the property for a period of more than 10 years, then you have to give the school districts a longer notice period and they get approval rights. If you are doing a TIF that is at or below the 10-year 75% exemption threshold, they're entitled to 14 days notice, and this is a formal written notice with certain specific information that must be provided to them in that notice. But they don't have any approval rights. They just get notice. If you're going to exceed the 10-year 75% thresholds, they're entitled to 45 business days notice, and they have approval rights for that. And in connection with approving a particular TIF exemption, they may require compensation. And how much compensation they require is a negotiation between the parties. They can require up to 100% of their millage applied to the increased in valuation. So in essence, that just leaves the TIF with the city and the county millage. In some cases, they can waive compensation, or they can negotiate compensation somewhere between total waiver and total make-whole compensation. Once the school district approves and you have negotiated the compensation, the city can pass the TIF ordinance. Once the TIF ordinance is passed, it makes the property eligible. You know, some communities think, oh, good, now I'm done, it's exempt. Nothing is ever really exempt until the proper paperwork is filed with the state and processed by the tax commissioner. So there is a Department of Tax and Equalization exemption application form that still must be filled out, submitted to the county, processed by the county, and sent on up to the state tax commissioner for approval like any other property tax exemption. So even though you pass the ordinance, it's eligible for TIF and you've declared it exempt, it's not really going to show up any different on the county tax duplicate until the tax commissioner approves the exemption application. For the specific project that has been proposed for the former Dow site with the port and Nyer, they are asking for a 30-year 100% TIF. So that would require school district approval and the 45 business days formal notice to the school district. In many cases, because while we sit here today and think, oh, 45 business days seems like forever, given that school boards generally only meet once a month, it's really not very long for negotiations and approval. So a lot of communities will sort of have informal notice to the school district that a TIF is being, considered and proposed, and they will start negotiations for that compensation package before they actually provide the formal written notice and start the official clock running, so that they have time to get everything done before the clock runs out. If the school has not approved before the 45 business day period runs, and really they have to respond to you within 30 days, if they don't respond, you can proceed as if they approved according to the proposal you sent them. Most school districts, therefore, will take action before the time runs out to disapprove it, even if they intend to eventually approve it, only so that their silence is not deemed as acquiescence under the statute pursuant to the terms originally presented. So that's why a lot of communities will sort of start the informal negotiations and notice ahead of starting that real clock running, so that they can all get on the same page and give the school district plenty of time to deal with this. With respect to negotiating with the school district, you have options here as well. There are some communities who prefer to negotiate directly with the school district for these sorts of tax incentives because either they have, an understanding with the school, past history, a relationship, and they feel it's important for the city to take the lead on this. In other communities, the city does not want to be continually asking the school district to give up its property taxes and to agree to these types of incentives and abatements. And so they have a standing sort of policy that says, you developer property owner must negotiate the school compensation arrangement with the school first. We don't want to be the one asking them to give up property tax revenue. You ask them, and if they agree, then we'll join, the team and move the negotiations along and the documentation and everything. So you, the City of Reading, need to determine which alternative is going to be best for you and for this project with respect to dealing with the school district. The other thing that is important in these projects is a development or service agreement with the developer property owner, where they are committing to pay not only the statutory service payments that are required by law in the exact amount of the taxes that would otherwise be paid, but this is the document where you get to require that they build certain things, that they're limited to building certain things. In other words, this is a commercial project, so they would not be allowed to build residential on this site. And you can specify what kind of project. Is it going to be retail? Is it going to be office? I believe in this case it's supposed to be manufacturing or in that arena, as opposed to necessarily, 100% office. So in the service agreement, you would spell out that, retail is not permitted. We're looking for these kinds of facilities to go on this site, and you, developer, are committing to build these types of facilities. Some service agreements will lay out minimum square footage requirements. You must build at least this many square foot, of manufacturing, this much square foot of office. You can build up to this much square foot of retail, but no more than that. So you can put those kinds of parameters in your service agreement. You will also potentially put provisions in there requiring them to make additional payments beyond the statutory service payments, what are sometimes referred to as minimum service payments, so that you would ensure any debt that was issued would have enough revenue to be paid, even if they didn't build what they said they were going to build, and it didn't generate as much revenue as they anticipated. So in this particular case, they are proposing that the Port Authority issue the bonds rather than the City of Reading. And that's really good for you as a municipality, because that takes most of the risk off of your plate and shifts it over to the Port Authority. If you were the issuer of the bonds, they'd be Reading bonds. You'd be responsible for the repayment of those. They could be issued in a couple of different ways, some which reduce risk to your general fund, but they don't eliminate risk to you and your other financial sources completely. But having the Port Authority issue those bonds means that you are going to be responsible for assigning the service payments that you get and nothing more over to the Port Authority, and they will use those to make debt service. And if it's not enough, that is the Port Authority's problem. not Reading's problem. So it really is one of the best ways to do these types of projects without incurring a lot of risk to the city. Now,
Brenda,
we've
do you mind
covered-
if I stop you right in there just to ask a question specifically about what you just said?
Yep,
What-
because I was just going to say, we've covered a lot, so
Oh.
do we want to deal with questions right now before we go
No.
any further?
Perfect. So you mentioned if there's a shortfall, what if there is an overage? So the port is proposing from their plan to use this for the rest of the environmental remediation, demolition, cleanup of the site, which they estimate, I believe it was about $7.5 million was their estimate, and they think the TIF, I forget exact amount the TIF's going to generate, but let's say that it comes under, and it's not as much as they deem, and then there's an excess. How does that work? And what kind of, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so that can be dealt with in a variety of ways. And you're going to, if you decide to go forward with this and you decide to go forward with the Port Authority as the financing entity, there will be a cooperative agreement between the city, the Port Authority, and the developer. And some of these things will be covered in the cooperative agreement. And in some cases, the cooperative agreement will take the place of the service agreement between the city and the developer, because both the city and the developer are parties to the cooperative agreement along with the port. So sometimes all of that's wrapped into one. But some of the provisions in such a cooperative agreement would say, okay, port's going to issue debt, city's going to assign the service payments over to the port. In some cases, once debt service is known, the city's responsibility could be structured in a way that it is limited to transferring only the amount of service payments that it gets up to a maximum of whatever equals annual debt service, and you keep all of the extra. Sometimes you send all of it to the Port Authority. They make the payments to the school district, they make the bond payments, and then at the end of the year, they send back any excess to you. So it can be structured in a variety of ways depending on how much you know about the bond issuance at the time you enter into those agreements, whether or not you are limited in sending a certain amount to them or whether they send excess back to you. And in some cases, they can use the excess to build up sort of a debt service reserve cushion fund for the Port Authority in case there's a shortage in a future year, and then say, oh, once they fill up this reserve fund to the tune of X dollars, then the excess comes back to you. Or, so there's a whole variety of ways that you can structure that flow of funds, depending on the terms of the deal. And I do believe, they indicated in this case that the sort of environmental remediation and cleanup work and site work would be around 7 to 8 million, and they were expecting to get about half of it from grant money or other sources, and they need the TIF to cover the other half of it. We haven't seen full-blown, or I haven't seen full-blown pro formas yet that show exactly what the TIF is going to support. Their initial indications are they believe it will support enough to pay half, but of course the city's going to want to see full-blown pro formas and analyze those, because even though you're not taking the risk by issuing the bonds in this case, and you're not responsible for shortfalls, you don't want to be entering into agreements that call for issuing debt that everybody knows on day one the project can't support, even if you're not responsible for it. You want to be, responsible stewards, and so you want to be approving a project that you have supporting data for that shows it's a feasible project and everybody rationally and reasonably, based on real assumptions, not pie in the sky assumptions, show it will support what they're planning to use it for. So the pro forma at some point down the road will become important. And part of the pro forma, one of the reasons that we probably haven't seen a true pro forma is the school negotiations will impact drastically how much money is available for project/debt service, because how much of the money is going to school compensation will factor heavily into that calculation. So do we have other questions at this point about anything that we've covered yet?
I have a question. You
Yes.
You said that you can get these negotiations started informally. Has anything like that been done?
Linda, correct me if I'm wrong. Has the school not at least been notified by somebody, either from the city or the developer, that a TIF is being considered? But I'm not sure anything further than that has been.
Yes, what I know is that the Port Authority and Jeff Shamot met with the school board to notify them. Is that right, Patrick? That's what we were told by Melissa, to notify them.
They met the day after they
The
came
day
to our
after
council
council,
2 weeks
right.
ago. So they have.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when council's finished, I'll have one question, Brenda.
Okay. So at this point, the school knows that there's a TIF
Yes.
being proposed, and that somebody's going to approach them later about approval and
Exactly.
negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
So how do these things generally work? I mean, does the school usually work with the city on these things, Linda?
Yes, and that was my question to you, Brenda. The one thing that I would highly recommend is that the city not be negotiating with the schools directly. I would like to put that onus on the developer to do that. And we talked a little bit about that, right, Brenda? The advantages and disadvantages of that. And
Right.
you can clarify that a little more. But the other thing I want to be very sure of, the fact that the TIF is issuing the bonds does take away a lot of risk that the city might have. But the other risk that I want to be very careful that does not come back on us is if there's this negotiation between the schools and the developer for a payment in lieu of taxes, that it's not the city of Reading that is making that payment, that has to come from the developer, not us.
Okay, well, that's not usual. So usually the compensation payment to the school is a portion of the service payments. So all of the service payments typically go to the city, and 90% of the time or more, compensation to the school district comes out of those service payments and is taken off the top, and then the remainder is available for the project. Now, sometimes the payment comes from the county to the city, and then the city makes the payment to the school district. In other cases, the city can send all of the service payments over to the port, and then the port would make the compensation payment to the school district from those service payments.
Yeah, Brenda, let me clarify. I did not mean pilot. I meant the revenue sharing. For revenue sharing is really what I meant.
What do you mean by revenue sharing?
Well,
do you mean
there are,
income tax?
okay, the TIF legislation, if payroll is more than, new payroll is more than $1 million.
Okay.
I don't want the city in a position where they're having to share that.
It's one or the other.
Okay.
So if compensation is negotiated with the school district for a share of the pilot payments, of the service payments, those agreements between the city and the school, for the school to approve the TIF and the city to agree to the compensation package, will contain a waiver of all income tax sharing provisions.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
And it's a little bit of overkill, but we like that language in the agreement anyway, because the statute says that those income tax sharing provisions that you're speaking about only come into play if a compensation agreement is not entered into for a share of the pilot. But we like to add in the income tax sharing waiver language anyway, even though technically under the statute it's not applicable. We like to cover everybody's bases. So
Good.
assuming that the developer and the, port come to some kind of a agreement with the school district on compensation that will be documented, you need not worry about the income tax sharing provisions, because we're going to make sure that that is covered and not applicable, and you're not going to be writing a check. So the base compensation to the school district typically comes out of a portion of the service payments that is payable either by the city before you transfer the money to the port, or payable by the port on behalf of the city after you transfer the money to them. And when we say transfer money to the port, we're really not going to transfer any money to the port, because they're going to have a trustee taking care of all that, and we're really going to send the money to the bank, but it's on behalf of the port. So that's how compensation typically works in these cases. And the developer in a TIF situation rarely comes out of pocket to pay that, other than the normal taxes / service payments that they would pay. Occasionally they'll make an extra payment or provide something, kind of icing for the school district, but not usually in a TIF situation. Unlike a CRA situation where it's an abatement and there are no pilot payments, compensation comes directly out of the developer's pocket from their tax savings, so to speak.
And didn't you say that the school boards, whatever the, what do we call the other schools, the joint vocational schools, what they're getting has to mirror what the Reading Community Schools are getting, which I think is unfortunate that there's not much opportunity to negotiate, but that is correct, right?
Right. So the school district has approval rights. The joint vocational school has notice rights, but no approval rights. And until a few years ago, they weren't entitled to compensation either. It's a relatively new statute, meaning, 5-6 years old. The language, however, is a little bit difficult. Before this provision was added, compensation could take a variety of forms, and people got very creative with compensation for the school district. Instead of just saying you get a share of the revenue, sometimes it'd be a portion of cash contributions, compensation, along with services. Sometimes, we had one developer who gave land to a school district to build their new building on. And then the, service payments they didn't share any of the service payments with them. They just gave them a bunch of land and said, here you go, build your new school over here. One school district took city services, police services, dare officers, crossing guards, health department services, school nurses and counselors and other kinds of professional services for the school district in lieu of cash contributions on a yearly basis. But because the statute now says you must comp the JVS in similar terms and rate, it makes it very difficult, because in many cases, the value of what's being contributed to the regular school district is significantly higher than what a joint vocational school would have gotten from just the regular tax payments, because the levies are so skewed. In other words, the regular city local school district gets, 40 to 80 mils of the property tax levies, and the joint vocational schools get 2 to 5 mils. So it's a huge discrepancy. So what that means is that now most compensation agreements, once they figure out what everybody, wants, they have to convert it into a formula that says the school district is going to get blank percentage of its effective rate millage, so that you can apply the same formula to the joint vocational schools millage, and they don't get a windfall in compensation. So if you say, school district's going to agree to compensation at 50% of their millage amount, and their millage is 50 mils, they get 25 mils. The joint vocational school gets 50% of its 3 mils, they get 1.5 mils. And you're not skewed, but it does take away a lot of the creativity for school compensation, and now it's predominantly cash, a portion of the service payments. Developers, and I think the proposal that Nair talked about during the presentation they made to the city was, they're proposing that the school get 25% of the service payment revenue. And when I just did a couple of quick calculations based on the current effective rate tax millage, what that translates into in terms of the school's millage is 25% of the total service payments that would be collected equates to about 35% of the school district's current effective rate millage. And so then you would also give the joint vocational school 35% of its current effective rate millage, and then they would be on sort of proportional even keel with respect to their current millage. Now, I have no idea whether that particular proposal that Nair is starting with is going to be palatable to the school district or not. It's just, their starting point where they hope they can get the school to, but we have no idea what the school's reaction is going to be. And somebody asked the question, how willing are the schools to participate? It varies everywhere. How willing is Reading schools to participate? I have no idea. School districts have to consider lots of issues when approached with these sorts of tax incentives, such as, what does the project mean to the overall community? What does it mean to the school? How much tax revenue are they potentially giving up? Is it going to affect their enrollment? Do they have room for more kids if it's a project that's bringing more people to the community versus a project that isn't bringing kids to the community? If they have lots of excess capacity, they may want projects that bring kids versus projects that don't. If they have no capacity for more students, they might prefer to incentivize projects that don't bring kids versus projects that do. There's a lot of different issues and factors that schools will take into doing their due diligence and analysis and coming up with the right number of compensation that they're going to need, in order to approve these sorts of projects. And I have no idea.
And one thing they'll take into account, right now the port owns that property and that's tax exempt. So there's no taxes being paid on the property now. And even before the port purchased the property, it was minuscule what that property was generating in property taxes. So one would think that they would certainly consider, okay, we're going to get a certain percent of something now for X number of years, and then we're going to get the full amount after the jail sentence is over. So I think that they obviously should take that into consideration.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, Brendan, when you said at the beginning of this is that it can be very complicated. I mean, It's getting more complicated as longer you're talking.
That's why you hired her, Dawn. You're in good hands.
I was thinking while she was telling about all this that Mr. Albrink and Mr. Gertz, certainly Patrick and you, Linda, would have to be in on these negotiations.
Yes, we will.
Simply because you've been there before.
Yes, we most certainly will. And I thought you asked the poignant question at the beginning, Dawn, and that is, basically what happens next. And I think what needs to happen is the schools and the developer slash port need to come together on an agreement. And then we see what that agreement is and then where we fit in. So there'll be some time. I think initially they wanted this to happen, before the end of the year. Everybody understands that's not going to happen.
Well, yes, developers are always very overly optimistic about how quickly these things can happen. And whenever one of my clients approaches me and asks, how quickly can we get this TIF into place? My response is, if there are absolutely no other parties involved, it's a 10-year, 75%, no approval, no comp, no developer, no agreements. You can get it done in, 2 months. If you've got school comp, developer negotiations, you should plan on a minimum of 6 months, and I've seen these things take 2 years. So these are not, get it done in a couple of week projects. If everybody stays focused, hopefully we are not looking at the 2-year period. And that when I say 6 months to 2 years, I'm not talking about just getting the school negotiations and the TIF ordinance passed. I'm talking about the whole thing, the cooperative agreement with the port, the bonds issued, the project starting, the whole, all the pieces, not just the beginning pieces. But they're most concerned initially that the TIF ordinance get adopted and the school deals get put in place. Because that gives them their parameters. They know the TIF is there and they know what it's likely to generate because they know what the school comp is. So those are the 2 most important pieces for them at the beginning, and then the rest of it, the cooperative agreement, all the bond terms, all that stuff will come later and also takes time. But yeah, it's not going to happen before the end of the year that you're going to be ready to pass a TIF ordinance.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. First of all, Don, I appreciate your compliment, but I hate to tell you, but I'm as confused as you are. I'd like to say what I understand, if I can simplify this, and maybe the people who are watching tell me if I'm completely wrong, but the way I understand the TIF, the people who own the property, the port, and ultimately, if it's NIR, they own the property. They're basically no tax revenue coming in. As Linda pointed out, there's nothing going to the school. It's all exempt. Now, the city gets about $3.52 a thousand, which is minuscule compared to what all the rest of the ones are going to be putting this opportunity in here for this to be developed. Then the servicing part of it is to basically do what I guess would fall into the governmental part of this, cleaning up the site, infrastructure. I don't know whether it's going to be sanitary sewers, whatever. And it isn't like the developers not paying taxes. They're actually paying taxes for not only the property as it sits when they acquire it, but also paying taxes on the newly developed property, which will be, as Linda pointed out, could be very large, 2 buildings and a lot of other developments on the property. That'll all be paid as part of their increased tax revenue. It'll come into the collections of the agency that's going to service this for us. But of course, what happens is that there's nothing coming in now to the school. There's fundamentally nothing coming into the city, and it's probably could be adequately defined as a hazard up here. Again, it's in my ward. It worries me that it's an attractive nuisance the way it's situated. So it isn't as though, I don't want people to understand that a TIF is letting the developer off the hook. It's directing that the revenue that's going to come from their tax revenue, if I understand this all correctly, goes back into servicing the property so it can better prepare the site so they can put this development in. Where the city would gain, obviously, is 400 jobs with hopefully good revenue from income and high-paying jobs, depending upon the 2 potential manufacturing facilities they want to build. And not only that, it'll provide not only that income tax revenue, which is very profitable to us and we need it, but at the end of the 30 years, or whatever the term is going to be, and the bonds are retired, then also the school and the city and all the rest of us will start receiving the tax revenue from the income taxes, which will go into portionally of our general fund and half into the fund for capital improvements. So 30 years is a long way off. I've got to work 20 years. I doubt if I'll be on this anymore because I tend to play golf for the next 10 years after that. But nevertheless, this is a no-brainer to me to try to develop this. And I would hate to see that the school would give us a lot of trouble because ultimately it's going to be a tax benefit to them. It's going to bring jobs. They're going to be people going to other parts of the community to buy homes, and I would hope that they would want to live here closer. And those homes will. I'm very pleased when I hear from Tim Cox and Bill Elfers, who I got a nephew with Cody that sells real estate around the city. I'm flabbergasted with some properties, and I'm very pleased with the property values that they're getting. So, to me, I think it needs to be understood. Tell me where I'm going absolutely wrong, but this developer is going to be paying taxes. It's just going to go back into servicing everything they're doing up there for 30 years, and then after that, all the revenue does go back to the city and the school as it presently would be. How far off am I, Brenda?
So, Mr. Gertz, actually, you're almost right. The property doesn't pay any taxes. Well, there's one little piece that there will be some taxes paid on the property, even while the TIF is in place. So even though no one is paying taxes on the property right now because the Port Authority owns it, the property does have a value, however low it is. And when the port no longer owns it, that existing value will go on the tax duplicate as taxable value. The TIF will not exempt the value that exists today or on the day that the TIF ordinance is passed. It will only exempt the increased value from this point forward. So sort of the value that is created by the site cleanup and the value from the new buildings. All of that is, as you said, will go into the TIF fund for the infrastructure. But whatever minuscule value that property actually has today, once the port no longer owns it, will become taxable value that everybody, the city, the school, the county, will get a little piece of that tax revenue. It won't be a lot because the current condition of that site means that its current value is very low.
I just wanted to make sure people understood that it's not an abatement. They're going to still be paying the equivalent of what the tax revenue should be on that property. Now,
correct.
For the city, the government, and I guess county, I believe we only pay 35% of the fair market value is actually what's taxed. Is that exactly the same?
Yes.
Okay. So the school, I think that's applicable to them too. I don't know what their rate is. I'm guessing $75, $80.
The school's current effective rate millage is 65 mils.
Okay.
And the current overall tax rate in the city of Reading is an effective rate of 92 mils. That's after all the reduction factors have been applied. So the schools right now get 70% of every tax dollar.
Okay. That includes the state, the city, the county. The state, does that take money from the state? They're under 10 mil them also?
The state doesn't have any property taxes, just the county, the city, the school district, and all the social service agencies through the county.
Okay.
And the joint vocational school, of course.
Yeah.
The library, those fire.
Yeah, those are all taxed through the county's portion. I was looking for I printed off the tax rate schedule. Reading, so yeah, Hamilton County, which includes all the hospitals, mental health, police information center, 911, senior services, zoo, children's services, parks, then the Reading schools, Great Oaks, City of Reading, the Hamilton County Park District does have a separate, and the City Public Library, and those are all the components of the taxes currently levied in Reading.
Most of those are voted, I believe. Is that correct? I think the ones.
Yes, because there's only 10, so the total full rate before reduction factors is 108, and there's only 10 inside unvoted mills out of that 108.
I think it's interesting. We're the second highest tax county we voted it in. I'm not arguing about it. And in the state of Ohio right now, I think Cuyahoga County, they have outdone us. Does that sound accurate?
Any other comments? Where's Paul Brown Stadium? Is it part of that? One of those funds you already mentioned?
Paul Brown Stadium does not have a property tax. Paul Brown Stadium is supported by the county sales tax.
Okay.
Along with certain other county pots and revenues. There are some TIFs and so forth on those properties as well, but the primary pledge to bondholders came from sales tax money.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Ms. Widmer for coming in and explaining all that. Don, you must be much more intelligent at this point.
Oh, I am.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't like to miss a meeting. I get so much information, but I hope that Brenda will be communicating with Linda and Patrick, and they will tell us how things are going.
She will, and we will.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Linda,
knows
you're
how to
welcome
get a hold.
anytime.
Linda and Patrick know how to get a hold of me.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you say something to me, Chris? I'm sorry.
I just said thank you. You're welcome anytime to bring
Oh,
any
okay.
information to council.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
We have no audience participation that signed up. Reading of any communications? Do we have Miss Carla still? There she is. None?
No, none.
Okay, no communications. Council committee reports, Finance Chairman, Mr. Gertz.
Nothing tonight.
Nothing tonight. Thank you, Mr. Gertz. Utilities, Lands and Buildings, Chairman, Mr. Lindeman.
We started with utilities, so I don't have anything to add at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lindeman. Zoning, Planning and Environment, Chairman, Mr. Powell.
Just real briefly, the Reading Planning Commission has scheduled a meeting for Monday, December the 7th at 6:30 p.m. in council chambers to discuss the proposed zoning changes. Once they have returned their recommendations back to council, I'll schedule a committee meeting. We'll go over it, and then once we have a consensus with the committee, we'll go ahead and bring that to floor council for discussion.
Okay, so it gives you what, just one meeting maybe?
Well, assuming that it's about what they sent before, I think we kind of went over it. So just be thinking and assume there's not going to be any other changes, and maybe we can come to a pretty quick conclusion.
Yeah, when did you say they scheduled a meeting? What day?
It's Monday, December 7th, 2020.
Okay, so that would be
6:30 p.m. in council chambers.
Okay, so we'll have a meeting on the 1st. And so we have 2 meetings before their meeting, so.
Correct.
Okay.
Hey, Dave.
Hopefully you'll get your information, be able to share it with council on the 1st.
Dave, I can make a comment. I think council, once there's a decision by the planning commission, it's sent to the council itself. We talked to Dave Stevenson. I think we have to do a similar thing and file notice. I think we got to make sure we do that in a timely way, unless we're going to discuss it. And we have the flexibility. I don't know the answer to that, by the way.
I believe that was within 30 days, if I'm not mistaken. And if Patrick, if you could make sure that you get us the recommendation right before a meeting, so we can get that scheduled instead of right after, since we're only meeting every 2 weeks. It kind of puts us in a time crunch if we would get it like on the Wednesday after instead of the Monday before.
Yeah, I have 30 days to get council officially any recommendations, and then you have 30 days for that. So yeah, I will plan that notice to you if you want it on the Monday, before your committee meeting. Is that what, if I can work with you to send you that on a day that makes it convenient for you, Dave?
Just what I was thinking, Patrick, was
I don't have a calendar in front of me, but
if we could get it before the council meeting as opposed to right after it, because if we get it right after it, it'll be 2 weeks before we can schedule the public meeting. Or if we get it right before, we could go ahead and schedule the public meeting, is all I was thinking.
yeah, let me see here, 7th. So, I mean, I might, just so there's, because we're going to have the holidays,
Right.
So I might, just wait a couple weeks to give you that notice. That way it just, because your clock, once you get it, yeah, like you said, your clock starts. So, I won't, I'll work with you, Dave, to make sure it
Okay.
works. When we have that meeting, I'll talk to you, and then I'll send you the official notice on a day that you think,
Okay.
because most likely, that way we don't have to rush the meeting through, we can have the meeting at some point in January,
Gotcha.
the council part. But I'll once we get there, I'll talk to you more, Dave.
Okay. I appreciate it, Pat.
Gentlemen, there's no reason why we have to wait for the official notice. You'll know basically that night, Mr. Ross, what their decision is. Could you not officially send every council person the idea of what they're going to be recommending? The official notice then could come at later date, so we got time to. I mean, I'm glad that your committee's meeting, Dave, but I think at some point in time we're going to have at least a caucus meeting or some meeting where they may certainly want to talk among ourselves. I mean, on one of the caucus meetings, I don't mean privately, I mean on another night, to get everyone's view of. I don't know if it's. Now, we may not agree. I may not agree with what the committee comes up with, and I'd at least like to participate in the discussion. So if we can get the actual unofficial notice, but the record, you'll know the record the night of the meeting, won't you, Mr. Ross?
Yes, I will. Yes.
Could you get that to me at least? I'd like to have.
Yes, I will.
Send it to everyone.
Let me talk to Dave Stevenson before what I don't want to do is send it to everyone, and then that clock starts because now you've received it.
No, I don't think I don't.
So let me just. I'll double check with Dave.
Yeah, just okay. Good
Dave
point.
Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Anything else, Mr. Powell?
That was it, Chris.
All right, thank you, Mr. Powell.
Hey, excuse me, question for
Go ahead.
Dave. Just quickly, Dave, did you look into that property down at McCluskey anymore?
I did. As far as the vacation and all of that, I have looked at it. And, my only real comment on that was that make sure that we're reserving an easement for the utilities that are running in there, not necessarily ours, but I believe MSD has some facilities and possibly Duke has some facilities. So I believe before we would get rid of the right of way that we would have to reserve some kind of easement for them.
Yeah, that's why I didn't have the legislation. You brought that up at the last meeting, Dave, so I'm still working on that.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Powell. Laws and Contracts Chairwoman, Ms. Edichico.
Thanks, Chris. I have no report tonight, but I just had a couple things I wanted to say real quick. First, I wanted to give a shout out to the Reading paramedics and EMS. My mom had a nasty fall over the weekend and they arrived quickly. They took good care of her and they got her to the hospital right away. So I just wanted to say thank you to them. And second, I did want to mention that Reading lost one of our greats this morning. Judy Pilgrim passed away from COVID. Judy's been a constant in my life and a great friend of my mom, and probably has the biggest heart out of anybody that I've ever known. So I don't have the words to say how greatly she'll be missed, but just please keep her and her family in your thoughts and prayers. Other than that, that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Edichico.
I'd like to add condolences as well. I was going to mention that, but I believe Mr. Pilgrim is still in the hospital himself, I believe.
That's correct.
So please keep him in our prayers too.
Agree,
Yeah.
I agree. So sorry for her loss, the family.
Yeah, I hope, Katie, I hope your mom's doing well.
Yeah, she's banged up, but she's doing all right.
Good.
All right, thank you, Ms. Chico. Public Health and Safety Chairman, Mr. Fischescher.
Okay, thank you, Chris. First I want to express my sympathy to the Pilgrim family also, but I also want to express sympathy to the family of Martha Stahl, who passed away last week. A lot of citizens and probably some of the council members don't even realize that Martha was very dedicated to the EMS division of Reading, especially during its early years before they combined with the fire department. Matter of fact, Martha was among the first group of paramedics to serve Reading. So she too will be missed in the community. As far as monthly reports from the police for the month of October, they had 1,222 calls for service, 17 auto accidents, 209 total charges filed, with 150 being original charges. Citations issued, there were 34 to Arlington Heights Court, 4 to Hamilton County Court, 123 to Reading Mayor's Court, for a total of 162 citations. A couple things they were involved in the past couple of weeks was assisting Amberley with the recovery of a firearm that was thrown from a vehicle during a pursuit. They took a report on a stolen vehicle on Leilanow. The key fob had been left in the vehicle. Completed investigation for a sexual assault. Charges to be filed in the upcoming week. Served a search warrant at Hamilton County Justice Center on a suspect for the shooting at the lounge. Warrants to be filed soon. As I mentioned at the last meeting, the department took part in the National Drug Take Back Day. They received 24 pounds of drugs, which was turned over to the DEA. For fire EMS for the month of October, they had 153 EMS runs, 37 fire runs, 8 of which were all calls, for a total of 190 runs for the month of October. That's all I have, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Fischescher. Any questions?
Just one comment. Randy talked to an officer about identity theft, and he was very knowledgeable. And in the back of my mind, I was hoping maybe that sometime you give a little helpful hints for people of my age about identity theft.
Did your identity get stolen, Don?
Please.
Is there two
No, it
Don
did not.
Lindemans walking around now?
No, fortunately, somebody was just trying to file a claim for unemployment, but it was rejected.
Okay.
It wasn't me. I mean, if somebody was trying to file a claim for unemployment, but the officer was very, very, very helpful.
Good.
Oh,
I had something similar to. I had something similar happen to me a couple of months ago, and the officer that responded was very, very helpful as well.
I think this is really for Mr. Lindeman. I did get a notice from the post office that said that my garbage can was being left blocking my mailbox, and I watched this past week, and it's the recycling man who just pushes it over, leaving it in the gutter right in front of mailboxes.
Cars.
So that I've seen one other floating in the yard of announcement. So is that something that that we should directly go to Rumpke for? Or is that something to bring to your attention?
Oh, I certainly can make a phone call, but I think it would be more appropriate for you to call and give them your address, et cetera, so that they can be aware of it.
All right,
Chris, they
thank
did
you.
the same thing for mine as well. And they were in the
Yep.
same street.
Yep.
Don, you know where Chris lives?
Pardon me?
I have an idea where Chris lives, yes.
Yeah, Don knows about where I live. In fact, they put one in front of yours too, Don, but you're so prompt, you probably got out there and moved the can before the driver for the post office got there.
I get about 6 of the neighbors recycling bins and put them back.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just
I must
hoping
say.
for a vote.
Except yours, Chris.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fishesher. Service Chairman, Mr. Albrink.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you all know, the Service Department is out picking up branches and leaves. One of the things that I did not mention a couple weeks ago was that if you've got a pile of leaves out in front of your house, make sure that either A, you don't park in front of them, or B, somebody else does when you've got them piled out there, because if they can't get to them because of a car like that, they won't pick them up. So like I say, if it's your car or if it's a neighbor's car or whatever, try to get them to move it until they pick up the leaves. And that's it for tonight.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Albrink. And Recreation Chairman, Mr. Lynn.
Thank you very much. I would just like to report that I think all fall sports are officially completed in the parks areas. And I think all park restrooms have been winterized at this time. So most of the rest, they're all locked for the winter and have been winterized. So that's pretty much all my report. I would also like to send out my condolences to the Pilgrim family. There's not a nicer lady than Judy Pilgrim. So it's a big loss for Reading, and my prayers go out to Jenny and Ed Deeds, also their daughter and their grandchildren. So a true loss. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Any other business? New business? Well, I'm going to go ahead and skip over that then and go to reports of officials. Auditor, Ms. Smith.
Okay. Well,
Oh, I'm sorry. Safety Service Director, Mr. Ross.
I was trying to get in on the new business part, and you went quick. So it goes hand in hand with my report. CDBG program, because of COVID-19, they're not requiring a public hearing. What they are requiring is a 5-day notice period. So a minimum 5-day notice period. So basically what that is they've given us kind of language, and I will have this posted on the website by Friday. And Carla, you will be the person's email where anyone that wants to give comment on potential projects, thoughts about these to do. The application is due. So that will be 5-day period starting Friday. Then by the next meeting, Carla can review these with council, and we can go over and discuss priorities. We can list multiple priorities in the application. When I put the notice on the website, I will post a link it's a very exhaustive, but just real briefly, eligible uses, and these are kind of the most common ones, are a number of projects in low to moderate income areas, acquisition or demolition of blighted properties, public infrastructure in low to moderate income areas, public facilities. You can do these in low to moderate income areas, or if you're going to be doing ADA accessible equipment, those are all eligible. You can do senior centers, parks, and I believe I already said acquisition or demolition of blighted buildings. These are all things we've done in the past. So I will be posting the 5-day notice period on our website as is required, with any comments to be sent to Carla. And then 2 weeks from tonight, if council wants to narrow it down to certain projects at that point, we will have, according to the county, in the range of 109 to $123,000 for spending. So I wanted to make sure you guys are aware of that. I was on a conference call with the county last week. So we just have to, instead of public hearing, you just give a notice that you publish on your website, Facebook page, but I'll put it on both. And just wanted to make sure Carla's aware, because you might be receiving emails potentially from people in the public.
Patrick, can we use that money or suggest using that money to further improvements down at the new bench? So I'm just asking the question, can you do that?
It is an eligible project. Now,
It would be.
It would be. I did speak. I told you, Don, I talked to Jim Moyer. Many of you probably remember Jim Moyer. He was with the Mill Creek watershed before he moved over into the private sector. So we had a nice conversation talking about the future of a next project, benefits. He's going to look into, other areas. There's definitely projects. There's a lot of information, a lot of things going on too that could impact our ability in a potentially positive way. I think I mentioned earlier this year, the ODOT has kind of changed their plan for the through the valley. So that would get rid of the split, which means the northbound lane event, when they finish that project, would be gone. So some of that area is right along the Mill Creek. Because Jim and I went through the potential areas, immediately, that not immediately, but the city owns and controls, are just south of the existing bench in Hayfie Fields, Koenig Park, which we own, and then there's an area from Clark Road heading north along the Mill Creek that the city owns property. All of these would be a little more just larger projects than the bench that we just did. So we just did the bench that was, a little under 400,000. Any of the other ones would be kind of larger, so, there's going to be quite a bit of planning, and I'll ask Jim to come, to another meeting in the future just to discuss next steps for that, because it's not as simple as just like, hey, let's apply for this and do it. There could be talking with him. I know it's been discussed, but the Mill Creek Conservancy District could be taking ownership of the Mill Creek from the Army Corps of Engineers. That process is underway, and there could be the potential. Right now, the Conservancy District doesn't have any money, but there could be eventually an assessment placed on all properties that are in the watershed, which means in the future, they could become a partner that could put up some money to partner with us to leverage our dollars in a way to get a bigger project done. Because 100,000 is not, enough to get a bench project.
Right.
But
exactly.
Jim and I are talking about next stages. I mean, the one that kind of piqued my interest, it's easier to probably do Hayfie and Koenig right away, but that's why I want to have Jim, because he's more of a technical person, can explain. But doing the one down at the Clark, from Clark Road along the Mill Creek, I think I think maybe we should look into maybe that being our next project. And the reason being is how he described the floodplain impacts for the projects, is that project, if we do something along there, and that's where the ODOT comes in, because that's also right through where I-75 is right now. So, but that would impact all those homes in the like the Gabbard, just north of Clark Road. So if you look at a map and you look at all those properties along there, because when you do these projects, it more impacts upstream. So like the existing bench, more impacts like up, the Jeff Long property up there. It's not a downstream impact, it's more of an above stream impact. That's my, non-engineer, non-professional, him explaining it to me. So I'll ask Jim. He's going to check. He was out of town when we talked. He's going to get together with the local people and talk a little bit more. He's going to get back with me. I think, it'd be good for him to come in and discuss in person, how the existing the current one, how it's impacted, and he can kind of go over kind of the next steps. Does that answer that, Don?
Yes, very good. You're on top of it. Thank you.
Okay.
I have some questions relative to that. If I could.
Go ahead, Mr. Kurtz.
Okay. Mr. Ross, you mentioned that we're not going to have a public hearing, but other communities have had public hearings I'm aware of earlier. And now if you're going to do the method, just so I understand what you're pursuing with these public hearing or non-public hearing with communication is for the next cycle. Is it not for 21, 22, and 23?
Correct.
And that has to be filed and submitted, I understand, before the end of the year. Is that correct?
By November, I said it earlier.
Got to be down to the department that's doing that we're a part of. What is it, November what?
November 23rd.
It really doesn't give us, I wish we had started it much sooner on this to get more public participation. And I read where other communities, I'm not even in Avondale, Sharonville, I don't remember anymore. They were having meetings earlier in the year during July, August, September. So, we're kind of under the gun to try to come up with a project that's not going to be paid to us until 21, 22, or 23, whenever we determine we want to get it. Now, the period of 18, 19, and 20, is that still $150,000 sitting out there? I
don't think it's a full 150, but it's a little less than that.
Well, I was under the impression that was going to be for flood remediation, but we don't even have a proposal, do we? I know the money can be spent. I found out should have been spent by the end of the year, but I think because of COVID, they're letting us kick it out to September of next year to spend the previous 3-year money of whatever it is, somewhere between whatever you're telling me, 150,000. But we don't have a proposal, do we? That has to be in by the end of the year also?
No, it doesn't have to be in. What I'm going to recommend is that I've talked to their office. It can be repurposed for a different use than what we initially, and I'm going to recommend, and council can decide to not do it or do so, but I'm going to recommend that we do it for public infrastructure in the valley. I'm getting some estimates on potential road projects for streets that need to be repaved.
When does it be done?
It would have to be done by next November, spent by next November.
It has to be spent by next year, but when does the proposal have to be before the agency that handles the community development funds for us? I thought that had to be, it's for 18, 19, and 20, council already decided was for flood remediation, and now you're telling us you want to amend that. I'm worried that if that has to be in by the end of December, the end of December, I got a lot of roads I'd like to see fixed. We spent $1 million up on the hill, and we're going to spend $2 million apparently on Thurn Ridge if we're not going to have a meeting. Monies are going to come out, but I agree that I'd like to see things done in the valley. But flood remediation is kind of paramount, because at one time I thought we were going to approach some people on certain areas off of Benson. There's a few homes in there that do get flooded on a regular basis that could potentially be looked at for acquisition, and then maybe they have gotten flooded in the past. But we've never been, nothing has been submitted to council for the flood remediation proposal. When does the proposal have to be in to be able to spend the money by next year? Is that got to be by the end of December, or do you know offhand?
Linda had that direct conversation with their office, so I don't have that. But I have a call with Joy Pearson tomorrow. So
I talked to Linda and she told me that JMA was handling this.
JMA is handling what?
The proposal for the community development block grant monies. She was not part of that process because I asked her about, I called her up and I just said, look, I get her in the middle of anything, but I said, I thought this money had to be spent, and they did change that till next year. That then had to be spent till then, but I was under the impression we had to have a proposal on that's logical and going to be approved and submitted before the end of this year.
That won't be I mean, if council agrees to use it for public roads, that won't be an issue because JMA has already prepared one estimate for Benson, and they're going to also look at Kaler Avenue from Jefferson to Reading. They're going to look at Roth and Anna as far as getting those done, and that wouldn't be a problem getting those projects completed in a time frame.
I guess what bothers me is that we had it started 3 years ago or whenever that we put in our proposal for flood remediation, and here we are running out of time trying to gauge some idea. I don't disagree with the ones you're talking about, but we did design that financing when we got the levy. A levy was passed for the money we are sitting on for road projects, which should still be used. I'm still very interested in flood remediation, but I'm kind of unhappy that there's no proposal that is on the books and it's got to be done by the end of the year. By the way, I think I did hear about that, and I think the residents should understand through the Valley 75 project, the northbound lanes, what they're talking about, if I understand this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they're talking about the total removal of all the overpass where it splits all the way up to GE. So all of that would be removed and taken down, and all the overpass area, all the concrete abutments. Is that correct? It all comes down if they approve that part of the project?
I don't know if it's been approved on their end. They have their ODOT has, I think, has to have.
If they approve that,
yes, it would get rid of all of the that big bridge over the bridge house and down there. All that would go. North and south would be widened on the current southbound, and then there would be an exit. So Davis Street would be eliminated as that's not changing. So the access into Reading would be, if you know where Lock Street is in Laughlin.
Right. I understand there. We're going to explore that and have an exit coming into Lock Street, or actually wanted to go all the way to Wyoming Avenue, did they not?
It would, yes, it would be considered a Lock Street exit, but it would have like a connector up to Wyoming Avenue, which is Benson for anyone that's unaware.
That's all in Laughlin, correct?
Correct.
Now I understand Laughlin's not happy about giving up their Memorial Park. That would have to go, correct?
I'm not privy to those discussions.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to admit again, I don't have the time to do this. I have to thank Father Ashcroft for, now that he's retired from where he works and he's not actively, he still loves the city of Reading, keeps involved. So if anybody wants to learn things, he's there to give you all the data and the background. I had a couple other questions. If you got, I don't want to interrupt the rest of your report at this time.
That was all I had.
Okay, I got a resident who's complaining, legitimately so, I guess. Actually, it's for her mother at Westview. I think the pole's been taken out 2 or 3 times up there with people coming down the hill. I'm talking about the electric pole.
Yeah, I know which one.
Is there anything that we could do or explore about putting guardrail up through there? I think it would be valuable to do because gas and electric company's probably getting tired of replacing it.
Yeah, I thought about that when it happened. So we'll look into, I mean, it's not really in the bend. It's kind of right after the bend, but we will look at potentially putting that in there.
I think it's been taken down 3 times now by people coming too fast or down the hill, I guess, or losing control. Is that correct?
This was the first time where I think it's been hit maybe 2 or 3 times. This is the first time it was completely dislodged from the ground and standing up in Columbia. So yeah, that happened last week. If anyone remembers that, in the evening, Columbia was closed.
Yeah, that one was just replaced. The pole he took out was, I bet it wasn't there more than about a week or 2.
Anyway, I know guardrails expensive than it used to be years ago, but it may behoove us, or maybe the gas and electric companies would be willing to participate in the cost to protect their pole. I know, maybe we could split it or something. Then the last thing I had, because I do want to go, the appointment I had, I want to start finding out what the results are. I never dreamt we'd be this long on election night. Well, I guess here we are. I did ask you to put the ad on our website for the meeting that Dave Powell brought up. Is that going to happen, or wherever?
Yes. Yeah, it will.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I probably have other things, but I don't have anything else tonight I want to talk about.
All right, so Mr. Ross, that was the new business. Do you have a report?
No, that counts.
That was it?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. I will go to the auditor, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few updates. So we have 3 more pay ordinances that I'll try to have for the next meeting. 2 of them are due December 1st, and one is the dump truck acquisition pay, and the other one is the streetscape bond. And the third one is actually the street improvement pay for all those roads that we have the 0 interest loan from. That one, if you recall, in June of this year, we kind of got a pushback of the payment due to COVID. So they kind of added to the schedule, and that way the 0 interest loan will go from 1 term more, but we're not due for 2 payments in January. We're only due for 1. So I just want to make everyone aware on that next meeting that we have, even if I don't have the actual bill in hand, I'm going to write it for the amount, maybe a little cushion for the other 2, for the dump truck and the streetscape, and then the streets and curb one will probably come, if not that meeting, the next one for the first one in December. So as soon as that bill is released, I'll have it for you. Let's see. Our audits are complete for 2018 and 2019, as well as a special audit of our police and fire fund, which I've talked about. So I'll have information next time about that, of how people can definitely go to the auditor estate website and access all those reports. You know, I'm proud to say a lot of, anything that they said for us there was something from 1998 to 2002. I didn't start in this office till 2016. A lot of people around me weren't here at that time either. So I'm glad we got those cleaned up. Thanks to the law director. Thanks to Patrick for all the help with that. And I'm already working on the audit material for 2020. I even sent a message to Carla today. We're trying to stay ahead of it, just because I have the close of the end of the month in December, as well as getting ready for the beginning of the year and all the reports that are involved. And even though we don't have a 2-year audit next year, they start preparing our auditors the kind of information for 2020 while it's fresh in our heads. So the more that we give them, the better off we are going forward. And, working with Patrick, working with all the department heads for that information will be very important. I think that is all the updates for me, except that between the general fund and the city earnings tax fund, we have about $1.6 million. Of course, we have more payrolls left and accounts payable. I'm actually sitting on a stack of bills as I sit here tonight to get started for November. And then I'll be asking for all department heads to have everything into me by December 4th is the cutoff. That way we can kind of do our part for the county. Patrick takes care of the general fund. I take care of the other funds. That way we have no surprises, and we have everything settled up so we don't carry in 2019 bills, 2020 bills into 2021. Those are all the updates for me, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And any questions from anyone? Thank you, Ms.
Sabrina?
Go ahead.
Sabrina, you talked about the streetscape bond. I think the last payment was 2023, is it not? What is it now about? 80, 90,000, still 90,000.
Let me look that up real quick. The streetscape bond payment is about 62,000. That's what it'll be for.
When's it retired?
It ends in 2023.
I believe so. I don't have that sitting in front of me.
All right. The point I'm bringing it up, I think we ought to start looking towards doing more streetscape improvements. And there was a study, when the study was done, it was Benson on all of Reading Road, so we only got portions of it done. So the council will be receptive. We had a plan for the south end coming into Reading. By the way, while I'm bringing this up, I meant to bring it up. Well, I'll wait till if there's any other comments. I'm sorry, Mr. Moses. So, final comment.
Any other comments from anyone? Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Yeah, we don't
You
have
have
any.
something else, Mr. Gertz?
Yeah, as a final comment, I disagree with changing the name of Reading Road and where they want to run it from the city of Cincinnati all the way out to Galbert. Cincinnati doesn't run all the way out to Galbert, so they're going to have to do something different. And I was talking again with, I don't know, it was Jim Lichtenberg, somebody, I can't remember, but I thought the road had a memorial name for some other prominent Cincinnatian, still called Reading Road, but it's, I forgot who it was, to tell you the truth. But I personally want to go on record again. I think it's foolish to change the name of Reading Road. It's if you talk to Mr. Lichtenberg, he has so much history about that, and there's other roads now, healthy, Mount Healthy. You got, Harrison Avenue. I don't understand why we have to jump, and I agree, it has nothing to do with President Obama. That's their prerogative, but I wish they'd pick some other method of recognizing him in the city of Cincinnati. Thank you.
And Mr. Gertz, I just got the answer for you to confirm it is 2023.
You're just too good, Sabrina. I'm glad you got in that job. What is it, 2023?
2023, yes.
Yeah, see, I'm not completely lost.
All right. Thank you again, Ms. Smith. Reading of any resolutions?
There are none. Carla had to leave.
Okay, reading of ordinances?
There are none.
Any other business from anyone? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for the long evening, sticking in there with us, and
Good night.
weeks.